Welcome to the Retirement Guy Podcast with Gary Alden from the Kingwood Investment Group. In this podcast, we educate people in or near retirement so they can make informed decisions and bridge the confidence gap. Learn how to mitigate risk in retirement so you don't run out of money before you run out of you. Join Gary Alden and explore strategies on how to live a stress-free retirement.
Hello and welcome to the Retirement Guy with Gary Alden from Kingwood Investment Group. Today we're going to be talking about SRO, retirement mistakes, and how to avoid them. Good morning, Gary. How are you?
I am just fine, Eric. And yourself?
Doing well. I'm back from vacation. It was a wonderful drive, wonderful time with family, and I know we talked a little bit about that. And you had a great weekend from what I hear. So what are we talking about today? We're ready to jump in.
Well, before we start talking about our subject at hand, we have a trivia question today.
All right.
And I actually researched this a bunch. I know the answer, but I'm not sure about how it came into being. But in what country is it illegal to carry old chewing gum stuck on your nose?
Gary, you're killing me with these trivia questions.
So again,
old
repeating, in what country is it illegal to carry old chewing gum stuck on your nose?
Stuck on your nose.
So I found the trivia question, but then I did more research trying to find out the background on the law. Could not figure it out, but it's on the books.
Okay, I'm just going to say it's this country. That's my guess. USA.
Okay, well, that's your guess.
That's my guess. All right, I guess we'll find out the real answer at the end.
Okay.
All right.
So our subject at hand today is SRO, retirement mistakes and how to avoid them. And you're probably wondering, Eric, what SRO stands for.
Yeah, I've got a guess, but I don't think it's right.
Yeah, it's not standing room only because we're talking about retirement here. But SRO is what everybody in this audience wants when they retire. And that is a successful retirement outcome.
Got it. Yes.
SRO, successful retirement outcome. So we're going to be talking today about some mistakes and maybe some ideas on how to avoid those mistakes. So several things that I've noticed over the years is that most people do not write down or even really have any thoughts in their head about how they really wish to live in retirement. They know they want to retire, say at 65, but when I ask them what is their picture of retirement, what are they doing the first day of retirement, usually the most common answer is, I'm going to sleep late. Well, okay, after you sleep late that first day, then what are you going to do? And lots of times I get kind of blank answers. They're not sure how to fill their time. So that's one of the things when we counsel clients and go over their retirement, we try to focus on that and get them to start thinking about what do they actually want to do in retirement. The other thing most people do not do is they don't set financial goals to achieve what they want to do in retirement. They don't make a commitment to be financially successful. They don't educate themselves. They don't take a financial inventory. They don't manage credit wisely. They don't seek professional assistance. They don't invest early. And one of the biggest things, they do not use tax laws to their advantage. And we have sweeping tax law changes since President Trump came in. We have the biggest changes to the tax code in like 30 years. So massive changes to the retirement landscape out there because of the change in taxes. And again, most people don't properly plan for their estate, and everybody has an estate. I don't care if you have 2 nickels in your pocket, you at least have a dime of an estate, and everybody or most people don't plan properly. I would tell you this, on a national average, only 1 out of 5 adults in the United States, in other words, 4 out of 5 adults in the United States, do not have a will or a properly designed will for the state that they live in. Because lots of times they've done a will, say, in Nebraska, but then they moved to Texas, and since Texas is a community property state and Nebraska is not, lots of times a will written in another state is not going to fly in the state that you have moved to.
That's a great point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And then the other thing is most people have never done a financial plan. And to me, of course, that's what I do all day long. So I just take it as just kind of routine. Everybody does financial plans, but it's not true. And it has nothing to do with the amount of money somebody has. I can see people with $50,000 saved for retirement, and I've seen people with $5 million saved for retirement, and neither one of them has a will or a financial plan. So it just drives me crazy as a planner that they don't have their ducks in a row.
Yeah. Hey, Gary.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, with the wills, do you suggest that people review that on a yearly basis, every other year? Do you do that with them, or do you suggest that they seek out an attorney that they review that with every year? How do you think people should go about that?
They should review it periodically, at least every probably third year at a minimum. For one thing, to see if there's any tax laws that have changed that maybe they can take advantage of. Or anytime there's a major change in your life, there's a birth, there's a death, there's been some major financial change in your situation. Anytime there's something major happening in your life, probably should sit down with an attorney, have that reviewed. I have an attorney here in my office, and then also a list of attorneys I can recommend to people in the area. But a very good point there, Eric.
All right.
The first two things everybody should do, don't pass go, don't collect $200, is they should have a net worth statement and they should have a cash flow statement.
Okay.
Every Saturday morning, I'm one of these anal people who does this every Saturday morning. I bring up my net worth statement. And usually, from one Saturday morning to the next, not as a lot of change on my net worth statement unless I won the lottery during the week. But I still look at it. And the other thing I look at is cash flow. To me, this is an amazing statistic. I bring people in, and one of the first things I ask them when we do financial planning, how much money do you spend now? Vast majority of the time, people cannot tell me how much they spend on a monthly basis. They just have not sat down and put pen to paper. Every once in a while, we get someone who's done that, but for the most part, people have no idea how much money they're really spending, and that's key to when you do financial planning, because when you do financial planning, usually we'll use an example of, say, a couple who's making $100,000 a year, easy number to work with. They're going to need about 70 to 80% of that $100,000 they had during their working years as income in retirement. So if they were making $100,000 a year working, they're going to need about 70 to 80,000 in income in retirement. Now that 70, 80,000 is going to be comprised of Social Security check, maybe a pension check, income from CDs, taking money out of IRAs, 401k plans, putting everything together. It's about a 70 to 80% number. Rule number one that we just discussed, two things you should do periodically during the year: create a cash flow statement and a net worth statement. Know how much you're worth, your house, your car, all your investments, everything. Subtract any liabilities that you have, such as the mortgage on your home, and then also create that cash flow statement. How much you're spending, how much you're taking in, and then how much you're spending.
Got it.
Now, there is debt. There's good debt, there's bad debt. One form of good debt that a lot of people have is the mortgage on their home. You want to live in a home and you don't have enough cash to pay cash for that house, so we take out mortgage loans. Good debt. And sometimes there's necessary debt. You need a computer for work. We put it on the credit card. But there's also bad debt, where we can't really afford a vacation, but we put it on the credit card anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people do that, and they get into trouble. A good example of getting into trouble with a lot of debt is the United States government. With about $22 trillion worth of debt, it goes up every single year, including this year. Investing early and regularly. When I can sit down with somebody young, I love working with young people, except rarely do I see anybody young unless it's, say, one of the children of one of my clients, and the clients will send them to me to talk to them about investing early. If you can invest early and use the power of compounding, it is dramatic how much money you will have later in life. And this is just one example, but let's just say somebody has saved up, say, $50,000 to a point in their life, and they're in a position to save, say, save $1,000 a month, say in their 401k plan, or outside of that in a brokerage account or IRA account, just using the number of an average return of, say, 8%. $50,000 invested as, say, seed money, and then adding $1,000 a month to that, and then averaging 8% return on your money in 10 years, your $50,000 plus the monthly additions, you would have a little over $290,000 in just 10 years.
Wow.
In 20 years, the number is approaching a little over $1.1 million. And in 30 years, which is kind of the average working life for a lot of people, you're sitting at over $2 million at an 8% average rate of return. Now, we're not talking about any specific investment here. We're just talking about investing in general, but over a long period of time to use the power of compounding. The next section that I want to talk about to you, Eric, is taxes. Do you like paying taxes, Eric?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, there you go. Nobody likes to pay taxes. Now, I think you, me, Eric, we realize that if we want to have nice roads and we want to have a fire department, police department, and the various services that go on in our cities and our states, we're willing to pay our fair share of taxes.
You bet.
But nobody should be paying 1 cent more in taxes than they have to legally. We're not talking about doing anything illegal here, but most people do not use existing tax laws to their advantage. And tax laws affect almost every single aspect of our, personal finances. So there's a couple of new taxes I want to talk about that came into effect when they passed the Affordable Care Act, when President Obama was in office, and they passed a hospital insurance tax on wages. And if you're making over $200,000 as a single filer or $200,000 filing jointly, you're now subject to a 0.9, I don't know why they just didn't make it a full 1%, but it's a 0.9 hospital insurance tax, and that's now on the books. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is, what is their AGI? They hear AGI, it's called your adjusted gross income. All AGI is, it is all of your income from all taxable sources. It's your gross income minus specified expenses. So AGI is the amount from which standard or itemized deductions and personal and dependent exemptions are deducted to determine taxable amount. So with the changes in the tax law, a lot more people are probably just going to be taking the standardized deduction, because starting in 2018, a married couple filing jointly is going to have a $24,000 standard exemption. And that's up from a little over $12,000. So it's almost double. Now, what goes away is the personal exemptions that you got for every person in the household. So if it was mom, dad, 3 kids, you got 5 personal exemptions. That's now gone. But the standard deduction now is doubled. So when you do taxes, you're either going to do your standard deduction or you're going to itemize.
Okay, Gary, sorry. Are you saying that you won't be able to claim your kids then at all?
Starting in 2018. Now, you still can do the child tax credit, and they basically double that. So if you have kids, the child tax credit is really going to make up for the loss of the personal exemption in most cases.
Got it. Okay, that's good.
So personal exemption is gone, but the child tax credit is basically doubled, and that was because Senator Rubio from Florida really objected to that and kind of stood his ground, and that became part of the tax law. So the new standard deduction is $12,000 for singles, $24,000 for married couples filing jointly, and $18,000 for head of household.
Got it.
Deductions, itemized deductions, getting harder and harder to take, because the government has eliminated a lot of things you can deduct. Plus now they have limited what they call SALT taxes. That's your state and local taxes, SALT. And they have now capped that at $10,000. And of course, in a lot of high tax states, people are paying a lot more than $10,000 per year. In the good old days, they could deduct it off their tax return. Now it's being capped at $10,000. Mm-hmm. So some people in certain states are going to pay more in taxes under the new tax plan than they did the old one.
Got it.
So taxable income, tax-free income. So an example of taxable income is your earnings from your job, your interest on, say, a CD or a bond. And there's also such things as tax credits. And tax credit is very, very valuable. Say you buy an electric car. There may be a tax credit right off the bottom of your tax return that you can take for buying an electric car. There's mm-hmm. also tax credits for solar panels. That's when you need to sit down with your tax professional and see what might fit your applicable situation as far as getting some tax credits.
Yeah.
The new tax codes, not going to go into it deeply because it's too hard to do in a podcast, but one of the things I wanted to point out, most people are now in a lower tax bracket starting in 2018, and the highest tax bracket, which used to be 39.6%, that's now gone. The new highest tax bracket beginning in 2018 is 37%. Mm. And that's if you are earning over $500,000 a year, you would be in that bracket. So let's look at a couple of tax strategies we might take a look at. One, and this always amazes me when I see this number, only about half of the people in the United States who are eligible to participate in a 401k plan through their work actually participate. Only about half.
Wow.
So it's crazy, and it's even doubly crazy if your employer does some type of matching money. Mm-hmm. That would be like walking down the street, Eric. If you were walking down the street and you saw a $20 bill laying on the sidewalk, would you reach down and pick it up?
Very quickly. Yeah, I mean, it's free money from your employer.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So I can't tell you how many people over the years I've sat down with, and they're in their 50s, and they're not in their 401k plan. And I want to grab them by the shirt and slap them a couple of times and say, why haven't you been participating in your 401k plan?
Yeah.
So participate in your 401k plan, way of reducing taxes. Because remember, let's just say you're making $100,000 a year. You put in $10,000 in your 401k plan. They're only going to tax you on the $90,000. Mm-hmm. So it's a big tax break. The same goes true if you are contributing, if you're eligible to contribute to an IRA. Depending on your income, you may be able to deduct the contributions to your IRA. And one thing I want to point out, which some people don't understand, let's just say I'm working, but my wife is a stay-at-home mom raising the kids. She can put in money into an IRA account too, because between the two of us, I earn enough to cover so both of us can make contributions to an IRA account. So a lot of people aren't aware of that. Same goes true on a Roth IRA account. So as long as your earnings are not too high, most people can put money into a Roth IRA account or a Roth 401k plan at work. Now, in a Roth IRA account, not a Roth 401k plan, but a Roth IRA account, when you put the money in, it's after-tax money, but you're not going to pay the money at the end. So you're taxed on the money today, but after it grows years and years and years, you're not going to pay taxes at the end. And the old saying goes, would you rather be taxed on the seed or be taxed on the crop? A Roth IRA says, we're going to tax you on the seed, but after it grows for years and years and years, when you take the money out, we're not going to tax you. So that's the advantage of a Roth.
Hey, Gary,
Roth 401k plans work similarly, except you don't have any income limitations. You could be making $500,000 a year and be able to contribute to a Roth 401k plan if your employer offers it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Gary, quick question for you.
Yes.
Going back to something you said before, we've talked a lot about Social Security on previous podcasts. You gave us an excellent breakdown in the last couple podcasts. Something you said triggered a question. So using your example, you said, let's say you're making $100,000 a year and you're contributing $10,000 into your 401k plan. You're only taxed on $90,000. How does that affect Social Security? I don't know how Social Security is taken into account. So you pay a certain amount into Social Security, and we talked about, I think it's your top 35 earning years that really dictate what your Social Security would be. How does that, do they take it out pre-taxed money? So in other words, do you pay Social Security based on the $100,000 that you earned before you put into the 401k, or do they figure it on the $90,000 that's taxable?
Good question. The Social Security is only taken out of the $90,000.
Okay.
Same way on your Medicare tax. It's also figured on the $90,000.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clear that up. I didn't know how that would affect your Social Security earnings throughout the years. So,
okay. Here's another tax strategy, and we just had a good example of this happen, I guess, 2 years ago. One of my clients was offered a retirement package. They were being let go. That's a nice way of saying it, but at least it was right around when they were going to retire anyway. And they were offered a very, very nice severance check. However, they wanted to give the severance check in December. Well, that would have done a couple of things. It would have upped their income for that year dramatically.
Yeah.
Because they would have had their normal income plus this big severance check. So it would have caused them to go into a higher tax bracket, pay a lot of taxes that they really didn't want to pay. So the client called me and he told me the situation. It was a major oil firm here in the area. And I told him, I said, go back to the folks. Would they give you the money the next tax year? And in fact, the arrangement he was able to make with them, because this was about a $300,000 severance check. That's a very nice severance check.
Wow, that's a really nice severance check.
And it was 100% of his paycheck. They gave him 1 year's salary as a severance check.
Wow.
But bottom line is, giving all in one lump sum, he was able to negotiate with them to do $100,000 per year for 3 years, starting in the year after he retired.
Wow, that's great.
So he is still in that 3-year period now, getting $100,000 a year, paying less taxes. And of course, he doesn't need all that $100,000 for income right now because he has his Social Security check and a pension from the same company. So he's actually able to save some of that $100,000 and put it away and grow that money for later years.
Yeah, that's great.
So consider tax implications before you retire. And if you run across a situation like that, work with your employer and see if you can come up with something creative. The next thing is itemizing tax deductions, and it's getting harder and harder, but here's something. I've done this for years, and I learned it from somebody else, is 1 year itemized. I try to put as much as I can in itemizing 1 year, and then the next year take the standard deduction. Because otherwise I found I didn't really have enough, say, in 1 year to itemize, so I would take the standard deduction. I was kind of hitting right at the cusp of it. But when I got this idea of loading up and doing a whole bunch of stuff in 1 year so I can itemize more, the next year take standard deduction, let the expenses and stuff bill, and itemize 1 year, take the standard deduction the next year. So that's a way of again, paying less money in taxes.
Yeah, especially
which we all want to do.
Yeah, especially with the changes.
Yeah.
Right.
When to buy and sell mutual funds. Mutual funds normally pay out capital gains once per year. And normally they do that in November or December. So before you buy, this isn't a taxable account, say your brokerage account. Find out when that mutual fund, let's say you have a mutual fund picked out and you really want to buy that mutual fund, don't buy it, say, in September. Because in November, December, that mutual fund may be declaring or sending out long-term capital gains or short-term capital gains because they bought or sold something during the year. And even though you just joined the mutual fund today, they bought a stock, say 20 years ago, and then sell it the day after you buy the mutual fund, you're going to get a share of those capital gains taxes added to your tax return that year, and you've only owned the mutual fund today. So mutual funds, you need to, if you are going to buy them in a brokerage account, you need to not buy them so close to the end of the year. Wait till, say, January.
Got it.
And that kind of brings us to the next point, and that is positioning assets in different types of accounts. Mutual funds as a group, as a whole, are pretty tax inefficient. So if I'm buying a mutual fund, it makes more sense to buy mutual funds in your IRA accounts, because remember, IRA accounts are tax deferred until you take the money out. So you're not worried about capital gains and so forth in a IRA account, because IRA accounts are taxed at ordinary income rates. So you want to put things you can control in a brokerage account, say stocks. Then you can control when you buy or sell stocks. You can't control what the mutual fund is doing inside a mutual fund. So position tax efficient items in taxable accounts, like your brokerage accounts, like stocks, bonds that you can control, and then less efficient investments in, say, your IRA account, 401k account.
Got it.
Okay, we're almost through here, but a couple of things that people get confused. You've heard an investment may pay interest, another investment may pay a dividend. So, Eric, if you had a choice, would you rather have $50,000 of income coming from interest or $50,000 income coming from dividends?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll go with interest.
Well, you don't want interest, because interest is taxed. You picked wrong, sir.
Yep.
Interest is taxed at ordinary income rates.
Ah, gotcha.
So if you have a CD or if you have a bond, a U.S. government bond or a corporate bond, they pay interest. You're going to be taxed just like it's ordinary income from your job.
Got it.
Conversely, if you own a stock that pays dividends, most dividends are what are called qualified dividends, and they're taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income. So in a perfect world, you want to have dividend income and not interest income, because you'll pay less money in taxes.
Good to know.
We all want to pay less money in taxes.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things, and again, this just came up because one of my clients wanted to know why she paid a lot more, because we have a couple of CPAs in my office, and we do income taxes here every year for literally several hundred families. And they want to know why their taxes were higher here a couple of years ago, and that's the Affordable Care Act. They passed a 3.8% investment income tax surcharge. So if you are married filing jointly with over $250,000 of modified adjusted gross income, MAGI, or if you're single with $125,000 worth of modified adjusted gross income, you are now subject to this 3.8% investment tax surcharge. So again, this lady who really kind of wears the pants in the family, she was saying, hey, Gary, why are we paying more in taxes this year than last year? Because we have the same basic income, and that's because of the Affordable Care Act. And again, that's only going to happen on, higher net worth people or higher income folks.
Got it.
And the last point I wanted to discuss here today, because we see this happen a lot. When you sell your home, there is a $250,000 an exemption from gain on your home. So if you buy your home for $1 million, you sell it for $1.2 million, and you're single, you only made $200,000 of capital gains on that house. I say only. You're not subject to any income tax, and if you're married, it's $500,000 exemption.
Wow.
When you sell your home. And that comes up a lot, because a lot of people, when they do retire, they downsize, they sell the house they raised the kids in, and they move to a smaller place. So it does come into being. But I had this happen. A lady called me up. Her husband passed away, and she says, we were thinking about selling our house. Then Bob died, her husband, and she says, we lost the exemption because now I just have the exemption for a single person because Bob died and we're not selling it while, there were two people alive in the household. If that happens to you, the surviving spouse has 2 years to sell the home, and they get the deduction for the $500,000 deductible, just like they were still married.
Got it.
So they have 24 months to sell it. So that's the last point I wanted to discuss, and that's something that we see periodically happen. And it was a case that just happened here within like the last 18 months. So that's just some things, again, kind of covering today some potential mistakes and some ways to avoid them.
That's great. Great information, Gary. I appreciate it. So now I got to know who can't put gum on their nose.
Okay, again, the question we start out with today, or the trivia question: in what country is it illegal to carry old chewing gum stuck on your nose? And it's Somalia.
Somalia. Well,
Somalia. So the next time, Eric, you're in Somalia, and I know you go there quite often, do not stick any old chewing gum on your nose, or you could be arrested.
All right, I'll keep that in mind as I wander Somalia.
There you go.
Sounds good. All right, thank you all for listening to the Retirement Guy podcast with Gary Alden. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Gary comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Thanks again for listening. For everyone at Kingwood Investment Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Guy podcast. Click the subscription button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Kingwood Investment Group. The content has been made available for information and education purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions that you may have regarding your investment planning. Kingwood Investment Group is independent of Next Financial Group, Inc. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Next Financial Group, Inc., member FINRA/SIPC.